One.
Good evening, welcome to the May 2026 Council meeting. I'm Mayor Kendall and thank you for joining us, Council, staff and any other members of the public gallery. If a member of the public gallery is disrupting the orderly conduct of a meeting as Mayor, I may seek their removal from the meeting. Macedon Ranges Shire Council acknowledges the Dja Dja Wurrung, Tongarong and Wurundjeri Woiwurrung peoples as the traditional owners and custodians of this land and waterways. Council recognises their living cultures and ongoing connection to country and pays respect to their elders past, present and emerging. Council also acknowledges local Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander residents of Macedon Ranges for their ongoing contribution to the diverse culture of our community. Nungojin, thank you. This meeting is being recorded and streamed live on the internet in accordance with Council's live streaming and publishing recordings of meetings policy, which can be viewed on Council's website. The recording will be available on Council's website within 48 hours. CEO, do we have any apologies this evening?
Good evening. Councillor Don Bonanno is expected to be a late attendee for tonight's Council meeting, and if he is not able to arrive before the conclusion of the meeting, he will be listed as an apology. Adele Drago-Stevens, Director of Corporate, is also an apology this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO. We'll now move to declarations of conflicts of interest. And do any councillors have a conflict of interest on any matter of the agenda tonight? No. Thank you. Section 6 is petitions, and tonight we do have one petition for consideration, and I'll be looking for a motion, and there's an officer recommendation on page 5 of the agenda. I think it was, Councillor Anderson.
Thank you. I'm happy to move the officer recommendation that Council notes the petition from Catherine Tollered on matter of the installation of the safe pedestrian crossing on Romsey Road, Wood End, with 174 signatories. 2, notes that the petition has been circulated to all councillors confidentially as it contains personal information. And 3, requests the Chief Executive Officer prepare a report in response to this petition to be presented at the July 2026 meeting of Council.
Thanks, Councillor Anderson. Councillor Pearce.
Yes, I'll second that. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any opposition? Seeing no opposition, the motion is carried, and we'll keep moving. And we've not received any public questions for response at this meeting, so we'll continue to the next section of the agenda, which is 8, adoption of minutes, and I'll be looking for a motion, and councillors, there's an officer recommendation on page 6. Councillor Guthrie.
Thank you, Mayor Kendall. The recommendation is that Council confirms the minutes of the scheduled Council meeting of Macedon Ranges Shire Council held on the 22nd of April 2026 as circulated.
Thank you, Councillor Guthrie. Councillor Anderson.
I'm happy to second the motion as per Councillor Guthrie's reading.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. Is there any opposition? Seeing no opposition, the motion is carried. We'll now move on to section 9, the Mayor's report. And I will just read through some little items from this month of May. So it's been a very busy month at Council with over 75 events and engagements listed below in the report that you can also read online. And we always try and be as transparent as possible with what's included in these reports so you can see what time, energy and focus is involved. One of the highlights was the Australian citizenship ceremony where we had 48 people who became Australian citizens, which I understand might have been a bit of a record for our Shire. And this was my second ceremony as Mayor, and it really is one of the most rewarding parts of the role, and welcome to our newest citizens. We also hosted our Community Awards and Volunteer Celebration last Friday, recognising the incredible individuals and groups who strengthen community across Macedon Ranges. Thank you to all our volunteers and congratulations to this year's recipients, Kathleen Wyatt, who was awarded Citizen of the Year, and also to our joint Citizens of the Year, Matilda Matthews and Tate Kemp. It was also a pleasure to open our Kyneton Showgrounds Pavilion and Netball Courts project, which was a significant investment, and thank you to the state government for also their contributions there. Councillors attended a series of Anzac Day services across the Shire, and thank you to all the organisers for your work in putting these events and commemorations on. Community engagement has been a big one over the last couple of weeks. We had a budget listening post in Gisborne as well as 2 ward listening posts. And I just wanted to make mention of a listening post that we're hosting this weekend now, so Saturday the 30th of May, at Clarkfield Hall, and this will run from 10:30am to 12pm. So we hope to see you there if you've got any questions or concerns you'd like to share with councillors about Clarkfield. We also had seeking community feedback on kindergartens and the future of kindergartens. That's open at the moment, so there's an online survey that's open till 8th of June. And also welcome back to Councillor Bonanno, who'll be joining us hopefully later on in this meeting. And thank you everyone for making the Macedon Ranges a beautiful place to live and work. So councillors, I'll be now looking for a motion. I think it was Councillor Scanlon.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm happy to move the officer recommendation on page 7 that Council receives and notes the Mayor's report.
Thank you, Councillor Scanlon. Councillor Guthrie.
Happy to second that, Mayor Kendall.
Thank you, Councillor Guthrie. Is there any opposition? Seeing no opposition, the motion is carried. And section 7 is about deputations and presentations to council, but we have not received any public questions for response at this meeting, so we'll continue on. So, section 8, adoption of minutes. I'll be looking. Oh, sorry, I've gone backwards. Sorry, no wonder I was getting we'll keep cycling round. No, so sorry about that. We are going to section 10 now, record of meetings of councillors and councillors' staff. My apologies again. Section 10 of the agenda, and I'll be looking for a motion as officer recommendation on page 11. Councillor Scanlon.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm happy to move the officer recommendation on page 11 that Council receives and notes the records of meetings of councillors and council staff as outlined in this report.
Thank you, Councillor Scanlon. Councillor Guthrie.
Happy to second that one too, Mayor Kendall.
Thank you. Is there any opposition? Seeing no opposition, the motion is carried, and we'll now move on to section 11, planning environment reports. And the first item in this section is PE1, draft biodiversity strategy 2026, and we'll be having an introduction from our Director of Planning and Environment. So over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. The 2026 biodiversity strategy is a refresh of Council's earlier 2018 strategy. It retains the original guiding principles and vision and brings Council's biodiversity strategy into line with new scientific knowledge, legislative obligations, emerging issues, and also current community sentiment and community views on what Council should be focusing on in this space. The 2026 strategy introduces 3 priority projects based on priorities that were identified through 2 rounds of community engagement that have occurred to form the strategy we've got. And the projects are Protecting Wildlife, Protecting Us, which addresses the high rates of wildlife strike in the Shire, Strengthening Biodiversity Outcomes on Private Land, and Building Biodiversity Capability across Council. There's also a refreshed accompanying biodiversity monitoring program with new indicator species that are a part of that in the strategy. And then remaining elements from the very much valued 2018 strategy are the focus on landscape connectivity and biolinks, support of local environment groups, a strong commitment to environmental education, and continued support for the Healthy Landscape program that Council runs. So we recommend Council endorse the strategy and note the inclusion of one of the projects in Council's advocacy prospectus. Thank you.
Thank you, Director P&E. And councillors, I'll be looking for a motion. Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Mayor Kendall. I'm happy to move the motion as per the officer recommendation that Council 1 adopts the draft biodiversity strategy 2026. 2, notes that the draft biodiversity strategy 2026 replaces the biodiversity strategy 2018. 3, notes that priority project 1, Protecting Wildlife, Protecting Us, is included in the Macedon Ranges Shire Council Advocacy Projects Prospectus 2026. And 4, writes and thanks all submitters of Council's decision.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. Councillor Joseph.
Yes, I'm happy to second that motion.
Thank you. Is there any opposition? Seeing no opposition, the motion is carried. Would anyone like to speak to the resolution? Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Mayor Kendall. This has had a lot of work by council staff, and we had 2 rounds of consultation because it is a topic that many in our community are very passionate about. So a big thank you to our staff and to our community. The vision remained the same and it was still applicable and has always been an excellent vision. It was sad to see in the report that there's been a decline in species since 2018, but there are many factors that go towards this despite our best efforts. So this is why this strategy is so important, to see if we can make sure that we can do more work, because once a species is gone, vegetation or creatures, it is gone for good and we can't get it back. So it's really important that we do protect nature. It's really important, more so now, we have so much regulation and legislation, but this document does help us to comply with our legal obligation to consider the impacts of biodiversity as per the 2021 State Flora and Fauna Act Amendment, which specifically says under Part 1, Section 4B, a public authority, which includes local government, must give proper consideration of the objectives of the Flora and Fauna Guarantee Act 1988 when performing any of their functions that can reasonably be expected to impact biodiversity. This consideration must include all potential impacts on biodiversity, including cumulative impacts and direct impacts. I think that's why this document is so important, and the community feedback, because the 3 areas they said was they wanted more resources to bolster conservation and education, particularly on private land. They wanted to deliver conservation training to relevant internal staff, so all our staff understand the importance of legislation and protecting biodiversity, we're more likely to get a better outcome, and this has been clearly outlined in the document. The shared responsibility of everyone, all of our staff, all our different directorates, and also traditional owners, the state, the federal, the water authorities, private landowners, council, and of course our valuable volunteers. I'm looking forward to that great two-way conversation about how council can keep the volunteers and how the volunteers can keep council, so we're not duplicating, we're not doing things in the wrong manner and order, and that's very exciting to see that as one of the options there to look into. I think it is really important that it is intersecting with all our other plans. It mentions the environmental management plans, the pest and weed strategy, the roadside conservation management, climate emergency plan, net zero 2023, to name a few. So it's a great document that is drawing from the documents and strategies that we already have and putting them in one place for biodiversity. The fact that annually we'll be looking at it, the fact that it's not a static document, as we get more information, we learn more about science, but what we are applying is the latest, we're going to innovate, it is really good. And that's why that took so long to get to this point with that community dialogue, the council staff. It is a very long document, but I think you can go straight to the actions if you want at what we're going to do, but I think the setting and the information that is in the document that precedes the action plan really explains just how important it is and how much work and effort has gone into this document. So it's an excellent strategy with so much feedback from so many people. And although it's long, I'd encourage people to pick it up and have a look at it. I know the 2018 version, all of our environmental and community groups refer to that all the time when they're looking for grants and trying to do work. So it's a really helpful document for council and for the community, because there's a lot of money that needs to be involved in protecting our environment. Weeds and pests is something that we're constantly hearing about from the community, and you'd be surprised how much money you need for just a small amount of weed and pest, and it needs to be in lots of areas rather than small. So this is a really great strategic document, great staff, and looking forward to the actions that flow on from it, and thank you to everyone involved.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. Councillor Joseph,
yes,
thank you.
And thank you, Councillor Anderson, for some excellent words on that. I thank all the staff for development of this policy. I think it's very important. Macedon Ranges is under an enormous amount of pressure from urban growth, traffic and vegetation loss, and hopefully we can do something to address that. But I also want to say that council can't do everything, and I would encourage private landowners to protect their land if they're able to, and also wildlife monitoring. There's now a lot of very good remote sensing wildlife recorders for both sound and visual. And if we can get the data to find out exactly what we've got, we can probably do a lot better job of protecting it. So I'm encouraging everyone to get involved. And yes, thanks to the staff for developing it, and thanks to all the volunteers who work so hard. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Joseph. Councillor Scanlon, would you also like to speak?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I'd just like to also commend the staff on this comprehensive strategy. This strategy speaks to greater focus on education and enforcement to reduce net biodiversity loss, but it's my belief there's still some work to do in direct consultation and education of private landowners with native grassland assets to highlight the importance of these ecosystems in the broader schemes of regional and catchment-wide environmental outcomes in line with various catchment management strategies. Up to now, there's been a strong focus on biolinks and riverine health, but perhaps an unintended detriment of highly endangered and dwindling native grasslands, particularly on private arable land, where cultivation and herbicide use are easy management tools. In more recent times, there's been greater focus on the benefits of regenerative and farm planning, where shelter belts and waterway exclusion not only show the improvements in biodiversity and water quality, but also long-term improvements in the financial bottom line of primary producers and the health of livestock and crops.
Thank you, Councillor Scanlon. Would anyone else like to speak? No? Okay, we'll keep moving. Thank you. We're going to PE2, which is AGR/2026/1 to 4 Oasis Avenue, Kyneton. And councillors, I'll be looking for a motion, and there is an officer's recommendation on page 43. Councillor Pearce.
Yes, I will move the officer's recommendation on page 43.
Thank you, Councillor Pearce. Is there a seconder? Councillor Guthrie.
Happy to second that, Mayor Kendall.
Thank you. Is there any opposition? Councillor Pearce, I assume that's not.
Sorry.
Thank you. Seeing no opposition, the motion is carried. Would anyone like to speak to the resolution? Councillor Pearce.
Yes, thank you. So we know the history of this development area. It was initially refused by council, refused by VCAT, and then changes were made and it was approved. And one important aspect in the approval was the Section 173 condition. So looking to alter anything, we've really carefully assessed this. The proposal is very minor in nature and continues to meet the purpose and intent of that agreement. And that purpose was to regulate the development of the land, and this is only related to the height. So the way the current condition was drafted, the existing agreement allows for double-storey homes up to 8 metres as a right, no planning permits required. The visual bulk of such dwellings, which are already permitted, would have a far greater impact on the visual bulk than this single-level house. And the roof line for single levels is 6 metres. This is looking to do 0.5 over. So I think the change would not alter the overall building height or bulk allowed under the agreement, and thus there's really no change to the visual amenity. And I just wanted to reassure everybody that we realise in the community that they were looking at this, and reassure them that we also look very thoroughly at this. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Pearce. Would anyone else like to speak?
Yeah, very briefly.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Guthrie.
Very briefly. Yes, when I looked at this one, I was concerned about it till I saw the later illustrations, which pointed out a very small section of roof only, and also the fact that they told us Metricon showed us a photograph of it, and there's one already in Gisborne of that very similar house, Willowbank Road, on the corner of McGeorge. So, when you go and look at that, it puts it in perspective, and you can see it's a very minor extension beyond the 6 metre height, and it really doesn't dominate the streetscape. So that's why I'm happy to second it.
Thank you, Councillor Guthrie. Would anyone else? Councillor Anderson.
Thank you. I think even without the picture, when you look at it logically, you could build a 2-storey for 8 metres, but a single storey only 6 metres. The person who has that piece of land and wants to build could just choose to put an 8-metre 2-storey building on it. So putting a 8-metre single-storey building, which would be quite a big single-storey building, doesn't make a lot of difference to the bulk form, further to Councillor Pearce's point, that you can still have, even if this wasn't amended, you could still have an 8 metre high double story. So changing this to allow you to have a single story 8 metre high still results in the same form, regardless of what we were showing, that it was only a small one, but it could be bigger than that down the track. I'm yet to see probably a 8 metre high single story building, but I think you end up getting the same as what you could have got for a double story, so it kind of makes sense that we can adjust this in this instance.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. Would anyone else like to speak, or we'll keep moving to the next item? We're going to go to the third item in this section, which is PE3 PLN /2025/144 to 1,430, 33 Bolinda, Darraweit Road, Darraweit GUIM, got to say it right, Vic 3756, and I'll be looking for a motion. Councillor Borthwick.
Thank you, Mayor Kendall. I'm moving an alternative motion this evening as circulated, and would you be happy for me to,
absolutely,
to read that?
Yes.
Okay, the alternative motion is that Council resolves to issue a notice of refusal to grant a permit for use of the land for warehousing at 1433 Bolinda Darraweit GUIM Road, Darraweit GUIM, on the following grounds. The proposal is contrary to the purpose of the township zone at clause 32.05, as it would result in a non-residential use, industrial use, which does not serve the local community needs. Point 2, the proposal is not in accordance with clauses 13.5-1S noise management, 13.07-1S land use compatibility, and 13.07-1L land use compatibility, Macedon Ranges, of the Macedon Ranges planning scheme. Point 3, the use represents industrial type activity introduced within an established residential township context and at a sensitive interface with surrounding dwellings. While individual amenity impacts may be limited in scale, the proposal fails to demonstrate an appropriate level of land use compatibility, having regard to the existing residential setting. Point 4, the proposal does not adequately respond to the reasonable amenity expectations of nearby residents, particularly in relation to commercial vehicle movement, on-site activity, and the introduction of non-residential use within a predominantly residential environment. As such, the proposal does not achieve acceptable land use compatibility or appropriately managed off-site amenity impacts. And point 5, the proposal would not result in an orderly planning outcome due to unreasonable impacts on amenity to the surrounding sensitive residential use in the immediate surrounding area, and as such is contrary to clause 65.01. The nature and intensity of the proposed warehouse use would give rise to unreasonable amenity impacts on nearby sensitive residential uses, including through noise, commercial traffic generation, and increased activity levels. As such, the proposal does not respond to the established land use pattern of the surrounding area and fails to achieve orderly planning outcome.
Thank you, Councillor Borthwick. Is there a seconder? Councillor Joseph.
I'm happy to second that motion.
Thank you.
Just point of clarification, just checking it's as circulated to councillors. There are a couple of minor word changes, so just wanted to make sure it was as circulated.
As circulated.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Borthwick. Is there any opposition? Thank you. Seeing opposition, we'll move to debate, and Councillor Borthwick, you have 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thanks, Mayor Kendall. Firstly, I want to acknowledge the work of officers in bringing this report forward. I appreciate the thorough assessment that has been undertaken, and I recognise the proposal is considered to be relatively low scale and located toward the edge of the township. However, after considering both the planning framework and the feedback from the community, I'm not convinced that this proposal achieves an acceptable or orderly planning outcome. At its core, this is a question of land use compatibility. While the township zone does allow for some flexibility, it does not mean that all uses are appropriate in all locations. Darraweit GUIM remains in character and in expectation a residential township. Introducing a warehouse use, however modest, into that setting represents a clear shift in the land use that sits uneasily alongside established residential properties. I think it's important to address the idea that this is simply on the edge of town. While that might be partially true in a technical sense, it does not remove the fact that there are immediate neighbouring dwellings whose amenity will be impacted directly, who will be directly affected. For those residents, this is not a transition or abstract planning outcome, it's their day-to-day living environment. We heard through objections that concerns are not just theoretical. They relate to noise, vehicle movements, and the intensity of the activity associated with non-residential use being introduced into a residential context. Even if each of these impacts is considered individually to be limited, collectively they represent a change in character and an expectation that I do not believe has sufficiently been resolved through this proposal. As councillors, it's not just our role to assess applications against policy, but to apply judgment in how these policies translate into real outcomes on the ground. Community sentiment is an important part of that consideration, not as the sole deciding factor, but as a reflection of how development is experienced in practice. In this case, the strength and consistency of those concerns raised indicate that the proposal does not sit comfortably within the existing township settings. Importantly, supporting this alternative motion is not about opposing business activity or small-scale enterprise. It's about ensuring that the right uses are located in the right places and that we maintain a clear and orderly planning framework that respects both current residents and future expectations. I am mindful that decisions such as this may be defensible. I'm mindful that decisions such as this must be defensible, and I am satisfied that they clearly articulate the key issues, that this use does not achieve an appropriate level of land use compatibility and introduces unreasonable amenity impacts within a sensitive residential context. Ultimately, this is about getting the balance right. In this instance, I do not believe the balance has been achieved, and for those reasons, I encourage my fellow councillors to support this alternative motion.
Thank you, Councillor Borthwick. Councillor Joseph, would you like to reserve or speak now?
Yes, I'll reserve.
Okay, great. No worries. Would anyone like to speak in opposition of this motion? Councillor Pearce.
Thank you. Yes, and thank you, Councillor Borthwick. And many councillors were present at the community meeting and the planning meeting, which I think is really great, and we get to hear the objectors and we read the objections. So the proposal's for a warehouse, and that is in accordance with the broader planning policy framework. It is not for manufacturing or joinery. It's not, I think, points 1 and 3 here state industrial use or industrial type activity. That it's clearly not industrial. It's actually in the officer's notes on page 71. It's clause 73.0415. The scheme is warehouse groups. So it's not industry at all. They've assessed and said it's acceptable planning outcome. Understanding the township zone and with certain permit conditions, and that's the big point to me. So I went through the permit conditions, understanding the guidelines of the zone, the local and state planning policies, but also the situation there, what we're looking at to be a township zone, and the type of goods to be stored and distributed comprising mostly of flat pack wardrobes and a hamper business. So the idea that these are pre-packed pallets and then they're going to be supplied and delivered. The business hours are very strict, 9 till 6. Their deliveries are expected once a month and otherwise a work van. There's no dangerous goods that are proposed to be kept on the land. We've heard there's no changes to the proposed access to the site. We have seen that the officers have said that it's in understanding the township zone, we've been informed that the zoning framework is applicable to the site is intended to provide flexibility in smaller towns where there's no rigid separation between residential, commercial and industrial. And here, this is bordering on then the rural land, right on the outskirts. So if there is to be a warehouse, this would be and is appropriate for it to be positioned here. I had a look at the planning permit and the conditions. So there are 17 headings, landscape plan, noise. Even within the noise, the general amenity provisions, there's 15 specific items that must be referenced for the planning permit, and that's noise, that's presence of vermin, building materials. They need a waste plan. The engineering has looked, there was some concerns about the traffic. This is a 60-kilometre zone. Our traffic engineers have had a look at it and have stated that they have no concerns with the traffic management and the engineering. I note that some of the objectors were concerned. Anyway, sorry.
Thank you, Councillor.
I got all carried away.
Would anyone like to speak for the motion? Councillor Scanlon.
Thank you, Mayor. Darraweit, GUIM, small rural township, 402 people on the far eastern extremity of our shire bordering Mitchell and Hume-shire. Darraweit, GUIM is 9 kilometres from our major north-south commercial road arterial called the Hume Highway, and is 13 kilometres from a major growth centre of Beveridge and many others. It's because of this close proximity, I believe, that planning applications of this nature and building a township zone of rural community needs to be closely monitored. The scrutiny here has been led by the townspeople themselves, and the valid objections have been raised concerning the application that's brought to the attention of its representatives, the councillors. Thus, while Clause 32 does allow for some industrial use in the township zone, it still must be amenable to the local character of the township and be complementary to the community needs and the rural landscape that constitutes this. I therefore am compelled to support Councillor Borthwick's alternative motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Scanlon. Councillor Pearce.
So could I just ask for a point of clarification?
Yes.
So my understanding is that industrial use is not allowed at this site. Like if there was any joinery or anything like that, this actually wouldn't be permitted at the site. But this comes under the warehouse scheme. So I just wanted to clarify, is that correct?
Thank you. And you're directing that at maybe Director P&E, just to
Yes.
clarify? Director P&E, do you have a clarification on the zone allowances? Well, let's take it.
So I'll try. I'm reading the planning
Yes,
scheme
no worries.
as we go. What's the question? Sorry. Very specific. Industrial is also a Section 2 permit use. It has a condition against that. That's not what is being assessed tonight, so I haven't looked at the condition. No, we've just assessed this as a warehouse. Yep.
Councillor Borthwick.
I'd just like to note, point of clarification, 57B, a point of clarification should be limited to the facts and should not seek opinions of members of staff beyond what's been expressed within the report.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Borthwick. So, keep moving. Councillor Joseph, would anyone like to speak in opposition? I might say a few words. Thank you, Governance. Thank you. Thanks very much for putting this proposal, and thanks to everyone for sharing their thoughts now. I'm just going to quickly run through some points. So one of the beautiful things about a township zone is it's generally designed for a mix of residential, commercial and limited industrial uses. So it supports a mix of compatible activities in smaller towns, which I think that diversity is wonderful. And warehouse is a permit required use in the township zone. It's not prohibited. And the question about not serving local community needs, I was really thinking about that, because I do think businesses do support community needs, and I think having a closet in your house is actually a community need. So I think we have to be careful when we're making planning decisions based on perceived community need. In terms of number 2 point, the officer report explicitly concluded the opposite of this, that operating hours and permit conditions can manage impacts in relation to these items that are highlighted. In terms of the number 3 item in the motion, industrial type isn't actually a planning type, and this suggests council is refusing based on a feared future activity rather than the actual application at hand. So it's a warehouse, that's the type here, not an industrial adjacent, industrial type-esque. We have to be really careful. In terms of number 4, with the facts here, commercial vehicle movements, they could be infrequently as monthly. So I think, again, that we're just being a little bit too open with things, and the hours are 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. weekdays, so that has been specified. In terms of item 5, officers did outline how it doesn't impact on amenity, if you read on page 70 of the agenda, and how they can be negated through permit conditions. So I was personally satisfied there. And officers acknowledge that the building is larger than the surrounding buildings, they get that. But the building already exists, and the application is only about a change of use, not the building itself. So any refusal or concerns about building amenity, this building will still remain as an outbuilding, it's not going to go away. So from my take, I'm just all in all, let this person run a small business from their shed. Thank you. Would anyone like to speak for the motion? Councillor Joseph.
Yes, thank you. I'm reserved to come to the end.
Okay.
Yeah, look, I just want to clarify a few things. A township zone is actually a residential zone, and it allows flexibility for other uses that meet the needs of the community. It's not a de facto industrial zone or a zone where you can have warehouses willy-nilly. I'm particularly concerned about the traffic issues with this development. It's a fairly narrow road where the property is located. It's where it changes from 160 zone on a curve. And I believe there may be large trucks making deliveries to this property, and that could create a problem. I also don't think we definitely want to be encouraging people to buy houses in Darraweit GUIM and build warehouses in their back garden, because it's cheaper than buying a block of land in a properly serviced industrial estate. Proper planning dictates that we should be directing industrial development into industrial zones, because those zones and those developments have the necessary infrastructure to manage industrial uses. Just also on the basis of the zoning, this property actually has 2 zones. It has a township zone, and along the back of the property it's also a rural living zone, and I believe a warehouse is actually a prohibited use in that zone, and those are the zones that abut this property. So I don't think this constitutes proper planning. I don't think it constitutes proper or orderly planning. I think there are issues with traffic, and I don't think we should be encouraging township zones to be zones where anything goes. They're there for residential zones and to provide services to those communities. So I'm therefore supporting the motion that Councillor Borthwick has put. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Joseph. I'll throw it open. Would anyone like to speak for or against the motion? Councillor Anderson.
Thank you. I'll be speaking for the motion. I can understand the assessment of the officers, but we have had 6 objections, and Darraweit GUIM isn't the biggest of towns, so 6 objections is actually a significant number of objections, I feel, for one of our smaller towns. Some of our bigger towns get fewer objections for that. This is a change of use. It is not a home business. This is an application for a warehouse. So there is a difference between home business and warehouse. Further to Mayor Kendall's point, we can't predict how many movements there will be. It's fine to say there might only be 1 a month. We do not know that. There could be multiple, depending upon the success of this business that is the warehouse. We know from the planning that there is forklifts and trucks and various things that are being stored there, and they do create noise and amenity. So in our planning scheme, it does actually say that we're meant to limit development in Darraweit GUIM, and it is something that I feel we should be looking at. There is this outbuilding already there, and so these people can choose to use their outbuilding for whatever purpose. I'm not denying it doesn't have to be demolished. They're allowed to have an outbuilding. But a change of use to make it different to just an outbuilding where they might just store their tractor for their land or their trucks or whatever for their own home use is very different to a warehouse. Because if they're just using it for their own outbuilding, they're not going to have those movements every day. There's not going to be the traffic impact, the noise, the amenity. It's just going to be a use supplementary to their residential use. So I think on those grounds, we really have to think carefully about each of our towns. We need to take each application on its merits. As Councillor Joseph has pointed out, it is in two zones, township zone and rural living zone. And so we do have to be very careful about what we allow where. And I think the scale and size of a warehouse in this location, close to residential properties in a small town like Darraweit GUIM, will affect the amenity of people. If these objectors did not think it would affect their amenity, they wouldn't have put in an objection. They would have been comfortable and we wouldn't have had objections and it wouldn't have come to our attention. It would have gone as a decision under delegation. So for those reasons, I feel I can support the motion before us, that we have to listen to our community and the nature of the objections and should therefore go with the recommendation before it, which is to refuse the application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. Would anyone else like to speak for or against the motion? Otherwise, we'll go back to Councillor Borthwick for right of reply. Thank you.
Thanks, Mayor Kendall, and thanks for the debate this evening. Even with all that's been sort of spoken, I can't accept that there's a satisfaction that the proposal actually achieves the acceptable level of land use within what is very clearly a residential township. And whilst I note Councillor Pearce referenced that it's on the edge of town, it's not actually in fact on the edge of town. There is a neighbouring house to the high side and neighbouring on the opposite side and to the low side. So it's not actually the last house on the end of town. So that interface I think is really valid. Darraweit GUIM is not an industrial area and warehousing, whilst it is warehousing, storage of, it still leans into a different landscape for a small, tiny little town. As a councillor, we're here to weigh not just on policy compliance, but the lived experience and expectations of our community. And I think that the number and the nature of the objections clearly reflect that this use does not sit comfortably in that context. That is a big part of our role here as councillors. And for these reasons, I do hope that you support the alternative, the motion that is before us this evening.
Thank you, Councillor Borthwick. I'll now call the item to a vote. All those in favour of the motion, please raise your hand. And all those opposed? Thank you. The motion is carried. Would you like to call a division? Thank you. We'll do that again. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Okay, we have Councillor Anderson, Councillor Young down there, Councillor Borthwick, and then we've got Councillor Scanlon, thank you, and Councillor Joseph and Councillor Guthrie, thank you. All those opposed, thank you. We've got Councillor Kendall and Councillor Pearce, thank you. The motion is carried. Thank you. We'll keep moving. We'll go to the last item in this section, which is PE4, and I will read this out. PLN/2020/225/C and AGR/2025/18-1346810141617181911121321252327 Trenchard Street, Woodend. And I'll be looking for an amended officer recommendation. Councillors, please. Councillor Anderson.
Thank you. Thank you for that effort. That was mammoth. I'm happy to move the officer recommendation with the amendments as circulated, and I'll just read out where the amendments are rather than reading the whole.
Thank you. That'd be appreciated. Thank you.
So basically, point 1A and B are the same. I'm just trying to. Oh no, sorry, I've got the amended. Yeah, point 1, the introductory paragraph is the same, and then on the following grounds, in point A, when you get to the line that did say removing the agreement, it's to be replaced with amending, the word amending the agreement. The same is at the first bit of point B where it says ending the agreement. It's to be replaced with amending the agreement. And in the bulk of B as well, where it says ending the agreement, it's to be replaced with amending the agreement. And I understand the rest of the motion is the same.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. Councillor Pearce.
Second the motion.
Thank you. Is there any opposition? Seeing no opposition, the motion is carried. Would anyone like to speak to the resolution? Councillor Anderson.
Thank you. Just briefly, and thank you, Councillor for Kendall, for saying all those letters so I didn't have to say them, and numbers. Section 173s are put in place for a reason, and this one did have a planning session with the representatives of the applicant, those that had already built, people that were thinking about buying land or had already bought land, and many issues were raised. The reason why the Section 173 was put in place, and this was a complex planning application, it was refused by council, it went to VCAT and was considered about the amenity at this particular location in Woodend, the views to the mountain, the trees, and so it was put aside for special reasons to have the 173 so that you were getting more space around the blocks, you weren't getting boundary to boundary houses, and it just had a different feel. People know when they buy, or should know when they buy a property or look at potentially purchasing a property, what those agreements are on the land and what the restrictions are in the build. So we've already had some people build there within those restrictions, and the officer's report clearly demonstrates that the amenity and the expectations of those that have already been built will be compromised should you change the Section 173 at this stage. So there is a possibility of changing the Section 173 in a slightly different way to not be as dramatic as what it is, but that is not what is before us this evening. We only have what is before us this evening, and if you read the officer's report, it makes it quite clear the reasons why the 173 was put in place and the reasons why it is felt that it is inappropriate to change, amend the 173 to the extent that the applicant has applied for. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. Would anyone else like to speak, or we'll keep moving? We'll keep moving to Section 12, Corporate Reports. And the first item in this section is COR1 Quarterly Financial Report, January to March 2026, and we'll be having an introduction from our Acting Director of Corporate. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. This report presents Council's quarterly financial report for the period January to March 2026 and provides an update on Council's financial performance against the adopted budget. The report outlines Council's operating position, capital works delivery and key financial indicators as at 31 March 2026. Overall, the report demonstrates Council's continued focus on maintaining a balanced and financially sustainable position while continuing to deliver services, infrastructure and capital works for the community. And there is a recommendation before Council on page 150 of the agenda.
Thank you, Acting Director of Corporate, and I'll be looking for a motion, Councillors. Councillor Joseph.
Yes, thank you. I'm happy to put the motion on page 150 of the agenda that Council receives the quarterly financial report as at 31st of March 2026 in accordance with the requirements of the Local Government Act 2020.
Thank you, Councillor Joseph. Councillor Pearce.
Second the motion.
Thank you. Is there any opposition? Seeing no opposition, the motion is carried. Would anyone like to speak to the resolution? Or we'll move on to COR2, Hybrid Council Meetings 2026. And we're having another introduction from our Acting Director of Corporate. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. This report presents Council's consideration of use of hybrid meeting arrangements for scheduled council meetings and councillor briefings throughout 2026, following technology upgrades that now allow councillors to attend virtually as required. The report outlines the legislative framework and operational considerations associated with hybrid meeting arrangements and proposes the approach to support accessibility, flexibility and business continuity where needed. The proposed approach also supports participation where unforeseen circumstances may impact in-person attendance while continuing to maintain transparency and governance requirements for council meetings. And there is a recommendation before council on page 156 of the agenda.
Thank you, Acting Director of Corporate. As mentioned, there's an officer recommendation on page 156. Councillor Guthrie.
Happy to move that recommendation that council resolves that the following council meeting be updated to a hybrid format with the in-person component held at the Gisborne Admin Centre. And then it lists 17th June 2026 at 7 p.m, 22 July 2026 at 7 p.m, 26 August 2026 at 7 p.m, 23 September 2026 at 7 p.m, 28 October 2026 at 7, 25 November 2026 at 7 p.m, 16 December 2026 at 7 p.m.
Thank you, Councillor Guthrie, for your dedication there. Thank you, Councillor Joseph.
I'm happy to second that motion, Mayor.
Thank you. Is there any opposition? Seeing no opposition, the motion is carried. Would anyone like to speak to the resolution? No. Okay, we'll keep moving, but thank you so much to all the staff for their work on that. That's brilliant. Okay, we'll go on to COR 3, additional council meeting date October 2026, and we'll have another introduction from our Acting Director Corporate. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Last one, I promise. So the report recommends council schedules an additional council meeting to be held online on the 7th of October 2026 at 5 p.m. The proposed additional meeting date is intended to support council's governance and decision-making requirements, specifically to consider the financial and performance statement in line with the timing of the external audit process. This will ensure council is able to meet its statutory obligations within the required timeframes. The report outlines the proposed meeting arrangements and confirms that public notice requirements will be met in accordance with the council's governance rules, and there's a recommendation before council on page 159 of the agenda.
Thank you. Councillor Joseph. Oh, sorry, it was Councillor Joseph.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to put the recommendation on page 159 of the agenda that council schedules a council meeting to be held online on the 7th of October 2026 at 5 p.m.
Thank you. Councillor Borthwick.
Happy to second the motion.
Thank you. Is there any opposition? No, seeing no opposition, the motion is carried. I'm going to move to section 13, community reports. And the first item in that section is COM 1, draft affordable housing policy, and we'll be having an introduction from our Director of Community. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. So the draft affordable housing policy updates Council's existing 2023 policy. It's been informed by updated housing data, research, benchmarking and community stakeholder engagement. It's intended to provide a clear framework to guide Council's advocacy, planning, partnerships and decision making on affordable housing matters. The policy outlines Council's role while recognising the key roles of state and Commonwealth governments and the open market in funding and delivery. The draft reflects current best practice approaches, including supporting housing that is well integrated into neighbourhoods, close to services and designed to avoid stigma or social isolation. Compared with the current policy, the draft places greater emphasis on long-term affordability, housing diversity, accessibility, sustainability and equity considerations, including the impacts of housing affordability on different groups within communities. It also provides more detail about how Council may support affordable housing outcomes through strategic planning, partnerships, advocacy and the use of Council-owned or managed land and assets within existing legislative and planning frameworks. Councillors are being asked tonight to endorse the draft policy for public consultation prior to a final version being brought back to Council for consideration.
Thank you so much, Director of Community, and I'll be looking for a motion. Councillors. Councillor Guthrie.
Thank you, Mayor Council. The recommendation is that Council 1 notes the affordable housing background paper as the evidence base informing the draft affordable housing policy. Number 2 endorses the release of the draft affordable housing policy for public consultation. that's where it finishes, but surprisingly it doesn't have a period. We normally say for a period of when we're putting them out publicly. So can I amend it to say that?
I can take an amendment.
Can we do that?
Yeah.
Because we normally put a period on them. Sorry?
Yeah, launch an alternative.
The motion can be moved however you wish, Councillor Guthrie. If you just the motion can be moved however you wish. You're free to add the additional time period if you wish.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Then to direct to what would be a reasonable time period.
Direct to corporate. Direct to community, sorry.
Yeah, 4 weeks.
8 weeks?
4 weeks.
4 weeks.
4 weeks.
Right, so,
Thank you, Councillor Guthrie.
so as I've already read, so after consultation I would include for a period of 4 weeks.
Thank you. Thank you. I've got that now. Councillor Borthwick, do you second the alternative?
I second the motion as Councillor Guthrie has read.
Thank you. Is there any opposition? Seeing no opposition, the motion is carried. Would anyone like to speak to the resolution?
Just very
Councillor
briefly,
Guthrie.
please. I think this is a very important policy, and what it clearly points out is that we are not the principals in this area. We are advocating to state and federal government on behalf of our community to do more about affordable and social housing. You know, in many years gone by, council had quite a few properties, but we don't manage them anymore. We used to have, I was on a housing advisory committee when I was first on council, but we don't actively manage those 49 properties anymore. They're out through a housing association. So ours is not really a hands-on role, it's an advocacy role, and it's a very, very important area. So that's why I'm keen to support this going out for consultation.
Thank you, Councillor Guthrie. Would anyone else like to speak? Councillor Borthwick.
Thanks, Mayor Kendall. Yes, similar to Councillor Guthrie, I'm excited that this is moving through to public consultation, and I would absolutely encourage everyone to get involved where you can, because affordable housing isn't just a housing issue, it's about community strength. And if we want to strengthen opportunities within the ranges, then this is definitely a policy that we need to get behind and get involved. So I would encourage members of the community to do so.
Thank you, Councillor Borthwick. Would anyone else like to speak? Councillor Anderson.
Yeah, I think particularly for me it's 3.7.1, providing clear and accurate information about what affordable housing is, who it is for, and council's role and limits in supporting it, because I think it's not well understood sometimes, and real estate agents often, or developers, bandy around affordable housing, and I think we need to use proper definitions. People can understand it, they know what it means. Sometimes people have a fear of it, and I think a better understanding, as Councillor Guthrie said, we no longer manage social and affordable housing, and that was due to changes in legislation, ability to get grants, and a whole lot of other reasons that we weren't best placed to do that. So I think that one in particular is a really important point in this document, because it helps give us that clarity to say that this is part of our policy, is to make sure people do actually understand what this means. So I really do encourage people to look at the whole policy, and that will help us, because you can help us to do some of these things in this policy to advocate on your behalf to get a really inclusive, diverse community that includes housing for those that really do need it, because everyone should not be without a house if they need one.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. Would anyone else like to speak, or we'll move to the last item in this section, COM2, Community Engagement Policy 2026, and we'll have another introduction from our Director of Community. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. So under the Local Government Act 2020, all Victorian councils must have a community engagement policy. Macedon Ranges Council's current policy reflects our commitment to meaningful, transparent and inclusive engagement. It was last updated in 2022 and is now due for review. The report presents the proposed community engagement policy for 2026 for Council's consideration and adoption. The policy is the first part of a broader community engagement framework that's planned. Other elements will include a community engagement strategy, processes, guidelines and tools that will be developed over time through a staged trial-based approach in partnership with stakeholders and, most importantly, the community. The updated policy builds on the strong foundation established in 2022, provides greater clarity and consistency, aligns with legislative requirements and best practice, and strengthens how community feedback informs decision making. It also clearly outlines roles, responsibilities and expectations to support transparent and effective engagement.
Thank you, Director Community. And Councillors, there's an officer recommendation on page 179 of the agenda, and I'll be looking for a motion. Councillor Pearce.
Yes, I'll move the motion on page 179. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Scanlon.
I'm happy to move, second that motion.
Thank you, Councillor Scanlon. Is there any opposition? Seeing no opposition, the motion is carried. Would anyone like to speak to the resolution? Councillor Anderson.
Thank you. Very briefly, this is a very high-level policy. I know it was time to update it. I'm really interested in point 2 and having that explained in a real plain English language for the community to understand. A staged approach to developing and trialling the remaining elements of the community engagement framework. It's quite a lot of words. There's a lot more work to be done. And if we're going to learn as we go and have this, engagement activities, it's really important we're getting that feedback from the community so that we can improve, because you guys are the ones interacting with us. You're the ones that see what could be done better or what was done really well and can give us those examples so we can improve. So if you read this document, it really is right up at that tippy-top high level. There's a lot of work to be done underneath it. So I'm looking forward to the evolving documents that are going to come underneath it, which are really going to get to the nitty-gritty where the community can know that we're hopefully meeting their expectations of what good community engagement can be, and that it won't be a static document, it'll be an evolving document that will respond to feedback as we go. Because we as councillors do get an awful lot of feedback from you. We do pass that on to the executive team, who I'm sure are already starting to work on these documents based on that feedback we've got so far. So please do continue to let us know what engagement worked well and what didn't. We do have a diverse community. Different things work differently for different people. It's really hard to get out to everybody. We do try, but let us know your thoughts so we can develop those further documents. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. Would anyone else like to say a few words? No, thank you. We're going to move on to section 14, Assets and Operations Reports. And there is an item in this section, AO1, Nature Strip Landscaping Policy Review, and we'll be having an introduction from our Director, Assets and Operations. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Kendall. Tonight's report outlines the review of Council's Nature Strip Landscaping Policy. The proposed changes improve the wording, update references to current legislation and council policies, and make the document easier for residents to understand and use. The report is also proposing a more positive and encouraging approach to nature strip landscaping while still maintaining safety and compliance requirements. Council is being asked to endorse the draft policy for a community consultation for a period of 4 weeks, as listed on page 195 of the agenda.
Thank you, Director, Assets and Operations. I'll be looking for a motion. Councillor Anderson.
Thank you. I'm happy to move the officer recommendation that Council endorses the release of the updated Macedon Ranges Nature Strip Landscaping Policy for community consultation for a period of 4 weeks.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. Councillor Guthrie.
Thank you, Mayor Kendall. Happy to second that.
Thank you. Is there any opposition? Seeing no opposition, the motion is carried. Would anyone like to speak to the resolution? Councillor Anderson.
Thank you. Being one of the councillors that put up a motion to introduce us having this nature strip policy when way back we had no policy, and there were people doing amazing things with their nature strip, but because we had no policy, if someone complained, it's like, well, you can't do that. So we've come a long way over the couple of terms of council, and I think having had the Loddon Campaspe work on health and showing how much if you put plant vegetables on your nature strip, and you can share that with the community and community interaction, which is something that was originally almost prohibited in the original policy for fear that it might have some unintended consequences. So I really think it is important that people do look at this, have a look at the nature strips around you and what you think is applicable and works. We do, as our director has said, need to make sure that we are safe, that we're not obstructing vision, that there aren't trip hazards for people. So I think it does provide a good guideline. And given that I think we've had no one actually need to apply for a permit to do their landscaping, and we've got some beautiful nature strips out there. It's a really good policy to have in place because it makes it fair for everyone, and there's some guidelines there about what you can and can't do. So really encourage people, particularly those that have nature strips, that they're thinking of embellishing and doing things. It can help with the biodiversity as well. It's a really great one to have a look at and to provide some input. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. Would anyone else like to speak? No? Okay, thank you. We're now going to move to section 15, notices of motion and rescission. And at this point in the proceedings, I will vacate the chair and hand over to Deputy Mayor. Thank you, Deputy Mayor Borthwick.
Thanks, Mayor Kendall. The first item in this section so we have notice of motion and rescissions, and I will be calling for a notice. Motion. Mayor Kendall.
Thank you. I'm good at waiting to be called. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. May I propose a motion? Am I able to read it out? Is that okay?
That would be excellent.
Thank you. So the notice of motion reads that Council, 1, writes to the Department of Education Victoria requesting an update on the status and future planning for public secondary education provision within the Macedon Ranges Shire Council, including A, how Macedon Ranges Planning Scheme Amendment C161 Macra, Amos Road, Riddles Creek, and draft Macedon Ranges Planning Scheme Amendment C164 Macra, Clarkfield, facilitated through the state government, are being considered within current and future population and enrolment forecasting. B, what population, enrolment and broader planning considerations, including population thresholds and enrolment criteria, are used by the department when determining the need for new public secondary education provisions within the Macedon Ranges Shire. C, whether the department intends to revisit, refresh or recommence consultation associated with the 2018 Romsey School project, given its proximity to Clarkfield and Riddles Creek. D, whether any land within the Macedon Ranges Shire has been identified, reserved or acquired for future public secondary education provision. And E, if a need for additional public secondary provision is identified, what indicative planning and delivery timeframes would apply. 2, provides a copy of the correspondence to the Minister for Education, Honourable Ben Carroll MP, and the Member for Macedon, Honourable Marianne Thomas MP. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Kendall. Is there a seconder? Councillor Young.
I'll second the motion.
Excellent. Is there any opposition to the motion? I see no opposition. The motion is carried. Does anyone wish to speak to the resolution? Mayor Kendall.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and thank you, councillors, for support this evening. This motion was driven by the community feedback in relation to the consultation about the development of Clarkfield as a township. However, I want to state that I've frequently had questions about the future of secondary schools in our region and concerns about capacity even before Clarkfield. To clarify, I've used the word provision here as it includes both the establishment of new secondary schools but also the expansion of existing primary schools to go to K-12 or existing secondary schools expanding themselves. To reiterate, through the planning scheme amendment C161 Macra, aka the Amos Road in Riddles Creek, our Shire will see an increase of 1,360 new homes and approximately 3,800 residents. In the draft Macedon Ranges Planning Scheme Amendment C164 Macra, Clarkfield, we may see an increase of 2,300 new homes and approximately 6,400 residents using the same modelling. That's almost over 10,000 people in 2 state government approved developments alone. And with the population predictions in those regions, it could be a population size of 20,000 soon. So our resident population in 2024 was 53,738. When we look at other developments that are being approved across our Shire, such as Rosalia in Gisborne, which was approved by VCAT, we really do need to start planning for our future now. At a recent Country Towns Coalition meeting in Riddles Creek, one of the number one concerns about developments of this scale is the lack of infrastructure planning. A new standalone government secondary school in growth areas is usually planned when there is demand for roughly 1,000 to 1,500 secondary students in catchment over time. That generally corresponds to a broader community population of 15,000 to 30,000 residents, depending on demographics and how family heavy that area is. In metro growth corridors, Wyndham, Melton, Whittlesea, etc., schools are often triggered earlier because growth is rapid and existing schools overflow quickly, and I believe this might be a trigger of 10 to 15,000 people. And in regional Victoria, the threshold can be higher because the department may instead bus students to existing schools nearby unless travel distances become unreasonable, and I believe this might be around 30,000. So the point is, I'm not an education capacity expert, and this motion seeks clarity and assurance for the community. And I did want to put it in Gen Z terms, the math ain't mathin', so let's have a conversation about it. So even if we don't plan for a new secondary provision, I've also sought clarity in the motion about what the timeframe is if we ever need to build one last minute. Would it be 3 years to see one delivered, for instance? Additionally, it would also be great to hear about if any land has been earmarked for a future secondary provision. Time really does fly, and it's coming up to nearly a decade since the 2018 Romsey School consultation occurred. Do we need to revisit this with Amos Road and Clarkfield coming online? Do we need to have a question about equity amongst our wards, noting there's currently a high school, Kyneton High in West Ward, and Gisborne Secondary in South Ward, and there's not been a new public secondary school established since 1981, which is actually before my time. Is Romsey a sound location for the East Ward? And this will really be up to the Department of Education to bring to us. We plan years ahead for rail loops and tunnels, but education should be no different. And this motion is about asking the right questions now, so our community's not left asking them too late. So thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Kendall. Would anybody else like to speak to? Thank you, Councillor Anderson.
Thank you. When in the last term of council we were looking at the Romsey structure plan, there was a very strong community sentiment about planning for the future of Romsey and the surrounding towns, and they already knew there was that potential of Riddles Creek coming online. I don't think it had been decided at that stage. But with the knowledge that Romsey itself was going to grow with the new town structure plan, there's really strong sentiment. Can you look at a place for a secondary school? What type it's going to be, you know, whether it's private, public, etc. But there was huge feedback from the community. So as councillors, we did our due diligence and we put in a potential site for a school. It's only a rough guide, but there was definitely that push from the community that we're going to have more people. Yes, you told us in 2008 we're busing to Kilmore. Kilmore International School isn't there anymore. You could go to Gisborne if you can, you know, but it's overflowing. You could go to Braemar if you could afford it. You can go to Kyneton. It's not close. We do know it's better if you can walk and cycle to places rather than have to, you know, get in the car, take the bus, etc. So I think it is really good if now down the track we can get that clarity from the state government about how are they assessing where they put schools, what is the criteria for us. Even if Clarkfield doesn't go ahead, we already have Amos Road online. We already have a structure plan that we're waiting to be endorsed by the state government that does accept growth in the area. We have a Gisborne structure plan which is going to get extra growth once that has been endorsed by the state government. So regardless of Clarkfield, we're already getting growth, and I think it is time to get that information from the state government so the community is aware of the expectations of state government and they can have those conversations with the expectations of our community.
Thanks, Councillor Anderson. Would anybody else like to speak to the resolution? Councillor Young.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I think at the outset I just want to say how incredibly important it is for Council to be providing insight and information and feedback from the community to decision makers when it comes to schools. It's it's a very difficult job at a state level to be shuffling around the limited amount of funds that the state government appears to have and trying to get the best outcomes for people. And sadly, regional areas do miss out quite a lot. So to have this on the agenda tonight is fantastic. The Mayor has done a great job of providing some analysis on the movement and growth of and numbers of people in this area. So from me, I'll just offer a personal anecdote on this one. I, in 1994, was a little chubby prep kid being walked by my mum into the brand new Romsey Primary School. And it was the first year it opened. It was really great walking into a new facility. And I remember that my mum has told me a number of times since then that they told her at the time that by the time I got to grade 6, the Romsey High School would be ready to go. It'd be built. We'd be able to go straight into year 7. And now we are some 20-something years later, and my daughter is at Lansfield Primary School in grade 6, and she's about to go to Kyneton High School because Romsey still doesn't have one. I had to go to Gisborne from Romsey. She's a little bit further south, going off to Kyneton. And so this has been a long-standing issue for the Romsey community. It's certainly been on the radar. In 2014, I actually mentioned that Romsey doesn't have a high school in my inaugural speech in the Victorian Parliament. And I know that the new member for Macedon was probably busy in February of 2015 when I gave that speech and may not have heard it, but I know that there were numerous conversations with her over that 4-year period where a Romsey High School was brought up. So it's definitely been on the radar, such that it culminated in a consultation in 2018 on the subject. So this is really great to have it being talked about. I think the people of Romsey and surrounds will be ecstatic that we're putting this issue on the table, and I do hope that the state government is listening.
Thank you, Councillor Young. Would anybody else like to speak to the resolution? No? Thank you, councillors. At this juncture, I will hand back, ask Mayor Kendall to resume the chair of the meeting.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Well done. Thanks very much. And welcome, Councillor Bonanno. It's great to have you here. Thank you. Thank you. We're now moving on to section 16, urgent business. And CEO, is there any urgent business tonight?
Good evening, Mayor Kendall. There is actually one urgent business item related to the Clarkfield development proposal, C164 MACR, that has been circulated to councillors as per the provisions of clause 18 in council's governance rules. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO. So I'll be looking for a procedural motion. Councillor Anderson.
Thank you. I'm happy to move the procedural motion that I seek leave that council agree to admit a matter as item 16.1, Clarkfield Development Proposal C164 MACR, on the agenda as a matter of urgent community concern.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. Councillor Guthrie.
I'm happy to second that motion that we seek leave. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Guthrie. Is there any opposition? Seeing no opposition, we will consider this item, and I'll be looking for a motion. Councillor Anderson.
Thank you. So this motion has been circulated earlier and prepared by the staff at the request of councillors. So I'll read the motion out.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson.
That Council 1 notes that its request for an extension of time to lodge a submission past the 1 June 2026 consultation closing date regarding draft Macedon Ranges Planning Scheme Amendment C164 MACR, which proposes changes to the Macedon Ranges Planning Scheme to facilitate a new district town at Clarkfield and subdivision of Phase 1, has informally been refused by the Department of Transport and Planning, and Council awaits a formal written response. 2. Notes that at the 22nd July 2026 Council meeting, officers will present a formal position on draft Macedon Ranges Planning Scheme Amendment C164 MACR for Council endorsement and submission to the Minister for Planning. 3. Notes that in the absence of a time extension, Council officers will submit an officer-level response to the draft Macedon Ranges Planning Scheme Amendment C164 MACR by the nominated consultation closing date of 1 June 2026. 4. Writes to the Minister for Planning with a copy to the local member for Macedon advising of this resolution, and that Council will make a formal submission following the Council meeting on 22nd July 2026. And 5. Notes that the Macedon Rangers Settlement Strategy 2011 and the Minister-approved Statement of Planning Policy identifies Clarkfield as a hamlet, in inverted commas, intended to accommodate approximately 300 to 400 dwellings and not as a district town of the scale of 2,500 dwellings. I'll be looking for a seconder.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. Is there a seconder, Councillor Young?
I'll second the motion.
Thank you. Is there any opposition? Seeing no opposition, the motion is carried. Would anyone like to speak to the resolution? Councillor Anderson.
Yes, just briefly. Timeframes for response. I know we give our community 4 weeks for consultation for some of our documents, but this is a planning scheme amendment. This is a really big scale document with a lot of supporting documents that go with it. So there's a lot to read. Firstly, I appreciate those community members that are reading the documents and putting in the submissions within the time frame. I acknowledge that the developer has had one online session last week and is having a follow-up online session this week. But it is not our amendment to run. It is an amendment being run out of the state government. So 4 weeks for us as council to get everything together, to talk to various stakeholders, to get a feedback from our community, it's an unrealistic time frame for us. It's like we are a referral authority for this planning scheme amendment, kind of like when we ask a water authority or Vic Roads or DTP to respond to anything when we are the referral authority. They get much longer. We don't restrict them to a 4-week time frame, and this is often why we have a failure to determine, because we're waiting for those submissions because we want the expertise. So for me, it's really important. It wasn't a big ask to ask for us to extend that time, because they're going to have to go through all these submissions and still look at the documents, get further information. So we can't do it in a shorter time frame. The staff are not being paid. It is not for this particular work. This is extra work on top of their normal work, because we're not the referral authority. We don't get money for a permit application or for the amendment, so they still have to do their business as usual work. So for me, it's really important that the community is aware that we're doing our best. The staff will put in points that we have discussed, but it is not an official position, because they're not able to do that until we get more information, analyse everything, and it comes back to council in July. So this motion here is really just letting our community know where we're at, why we're in this position, and that we are working really hard, and really a big thank you to all our staff. It's across all our departments, because it impacts every part of the environment, the drainage, the assets, the infrastructure, orderly planning, all the things that we try and do well. We want to do it appropriately, and it needs more than that 4-week time frame. We weren't even told about this before everybody else was told about it, so we didn't even get a warning or a heads up this was coming. It's just been, here it is. You've got the same time frame as everybody else. So thank you to the staff for requesting an extension. I do hope that the government will have a change of heart and will allow us to have that extended time frame, but this is where we're at the moment. They have verbally said, and I believe they've actually said, we refuse to do it, and that is why there is that strength of the wording in the motion. So thank you, staff, for putting this together at short notice.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. Would anyone else like to speak? Councillor Scanlon.
Just further to what Councillor Anderson has said, there was just my quick calculations. So the consultation opened on the 4th of May to June 1, which works out at 22 business days for the planning staff, the opportunity to assess. There was 19 pieces of amendment documents that they have to wade through, and it's just totally unreasonable that they would have to do that. It's pretty much left the community, the affected individual, councils, the staff reeling as to what the development, how it will impact the region, and it's very difficult to understand, because the concept of a township in Clarkfield goes back for probably 30, 40 years. And here we are, we're racing to the end, and we're all wondering why this race is on. And it just seems totally ill-conceived, the way this consultation and this discourse is rolling out. So, just if you're for or against, if anyone's out there listening, if you're for or against this proposal, we've got a listening post on Saturday, so come down and have a say, because it's important that you do.
Thank you, Councillor Scanlon. Would anyone else like to speak? Councillor Joseph.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to say a few words. Look, I feel that this raises quite a few governance issues in terms of why the race is on, why we haven't been given the opportunity to have a proper amount of time in order to respond, both the council itself and the community. And I don't think there's been a really reasonable explanation for why that is occurring. So I think that's fairly unreasonable on the part of the state government. I'd also welcome all the community to actually take the time to put in objections, to raise concerns if they are concerned about it. I mean, the notion that you can have a major town that depends on one rail line when the capacity of that rail line was significantly decreased many years ago when they got rid of half of it. I think anyone who catches the train on the Bendigo line should be concerned that they'll never get a seat again if this goes ahead. Because there isn't the ability to increase the capacity. And yeah, it's going to be a very isolated little community that doesn't have the infrastructure, or not so little community, that won't have any of the infrastructure or the services it needs, and the notion that everyone will ride bicycles and that it's going to be great green development, I don't think so. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Joseph. Would anyone else like to speak? Councillor Young.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillors, do I appear sufficiently shocked? Because I'm not sure that I'm quite expressing how shocked I am that a government trying to force upon us a development that no one wants has caught wind of some opposition and is now not letting us speak. I mean, I didn't see that coming. I thought that they would welcome us telling them all the things that are wrong with this, because we're all hearing it. Every corner of this Shire is now talking about all the things that are wrong with this development. And point 5 in this motion really sets the scene for that. Because we know what Clarkfield is, train station. It makes sense to have a little bit of development there. Clarkfield's a beautiful place. Why wouldn't someone want to go and live there? But to take it from what is a reasonable amount of development, to have a nice little town there, in keeping with the rest of the Shire, to something that is 2,500 dwellings of shoebox houses, where no one will have space to park a car, in an area where we all rely on cars. These are the things that everyone's talking about. And so if the government's not going to listen to it, then the council has a responsibility to do whatever they can to shout and scream and tell the government how unfair it is, how much the community doesn't want it. And I'm very glad that we've got another session on Saturday, and I encourage everyone to come along to it. Because there is conversation that I've heard already about how many tractors we can get to do some sort of London City-style protest and block the streets in what is a little tiny town of Clarkfield, right next to the main thoroughfare that feeds everyone who lives in between the Calder and the Hume into the city. So I guess we really just need to impress upon the government how incredibly ridiculous it is that this kind of development is going ahead. Not that we don't want any development, we want good fitting development, but you cannot turn us into Melbourne. We live out here because we have a nice buffer from Melbourne. We don't want to be Melbourne. We have a little country train station, as Councillor Joseph said. I'm actually not sure whether anyone looking at this from the government has realised that all the work they've done on the Sunbury line doesn't actually get out here. So we've now got the rail tunnel through Melbourne. And anyone looking at the map in government, I encourage you to just scroll your mouse and zoom out a little bit, and you'll see that Clarkfield is on this side of Sunbury. Clarkfield's not on the other side of Sunbury. We are not going to be able to service a 2,500 person town, dwelling town, with a little country train station. And I dare anyone in government at the moment to stand there and say that they've got the regional train network working so effectively and conveniently that one could run their entire lives by its timetable. It's just not possible. So this proposal is ridiculous, and I'm glad the council is united in standing up to it.
Thank you, Councillor Young. Would anyone else like to speak? Councillor Borthwick.
Yes, thank you. And thanks for everyone that's spoken before me. I think one of the beautiful things about this particular cohort of councillors is the real diversity in what we bring as a collective group. And this is something that I absolutely think that we are united on in terms of having our voice heard. In the absence of the extension, I understand that officers will prepare a response to meet the statutory guideline, but that should not be mistaken for council's final view. And I think I'd like to make that really clear to the community that we have not formed our final position whilst it's implied here, but that the final view has not been put forward as yet. Further to Councillor Scanlon's points around getting involved and getting your feedback in, you don't have to be an expert to put your feedback in. It is simply a one-liner, a sentence. Keep it sensible, keep it safe, but have your say. I absolutely encourage you to participate, whether you're for or against. I encourage you to participate in the have your say. You do not have to have a background in expertise. You can read, you can read the bits of the documents that you like, but feedback is feedback, and I absolutely encourage people to pop that forward. I think for me, what's been put forward, thanks to Councillor Anderson, is this protects council's role and respects the community's right to be represented and ensures that our final position can be transparent, deliberative and defensible and available for the public to see. So I'm grateful for the work that's gone into this.
Thank you, Councillor Borthwick. Would anyone else like to speak? I might say a couple of words. Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Scanlon, I really love what you're saying about a race, because this does feel like a race, and I just think that's just switched in my mind so much, because we need genuine, consultation, and I think why is there a rush when we've waited 40 years? Let's do this well, let's do this right. So I'm getting a lot of feedback in the community that they're saying, oh, council, why are you doing this? Just so people know, this is facilitated through the developer facilitation program by the state government, so it'll be decided on by the minister. So just to get that clear, and any criticism of the consultation to date which I've received, again, that's not council leading the consultation. Council did actually advocate for the consultation to be available in February 2026, so potentially the fact that we've got this 22-day consultation has come out of councillors trying to advocate for a better consultation. So even though community members might think it is a little bit of consultation theatre and your voice won't be heard, it is really important that you do put your feedback into Engage Victoria. People have even suggested to use AI just to get your submission and get your voice heard. There is a developer-led, as Councillor Anderson said, a webinar tomorrow night, so that's the 28th of May at 7 p.m, so definitely check out that. And as I've been sharing it even with my community, there's been about 200-300 comments on this, and pretty much everyone's really wants to have a say and are not feeling heard. And so I do think we need to get beyond politics and actually get to listen to what people want here and really drive beautiful outcomes. And I actually played around in AI, and I made do Clarkfield in a country town way, and it came up all these beautiful renders of how you could have like a modern country style place there. So it would be great to see a little bit of movement there from what's there. And I've been calling this a little bit Clarkfield City, but it isn't meant to be a city, it's meant to be a town. And we do have to think about an integrated approach to development in our Shire, and I think you can't just have something that's completely out of character. It will impact everyone across our Shire, because once dwellings come online, they are where our rates get serviced to. So if there are infrastructure gaps and we don't plan accordingly, council's often left to pick up the costs there, and there's been a lot of cost shifting and things like that. So I think this is great that we've brought this. We will potentially have something coming to July as noted, but also it will be an ongoing conversation, and we'll try and keep the community on the journey as much as possible. So thank you. anyone else like to say anything? Otherwise, we'll keep moving. So we'll go to the final section, and there's no confidential reports tonight, so we won't consider any. And for those watching at home, thank you for being on the journey, and we're going to close this meeting at 8:38 p.m. Thank you.